Kisukukit. Thank you for joining me for another baking video. Today we're gonna bake some bread. So you'll need some flour, some oil, doesn't really matter what kind, a little bit of sugar, salt, yeast, and then if you'd like some rosemary leaves, fresh or dried is fine. Don't forget parchment paper, your measuring cups, pits aknena, some spoons, and some bowls. Don't forget to wash your hands. I'm wearing gloves today because my hands are quite dry. The first thing we need to do is proof the yeast. So we need 1 packet of yeast and 2 teaspoons of sugar. So I'm gonna add the sugar into my bowl. And then a cup and 1/3 of warm water. And we want the water to be fairly warm, but not boiling. Then we're just gonna sprinkle the yeast on top. Give that a little stir and then let that sit for 5 to 10 minutes. Great, so once the yeast looks all frothy like this, we're ready to add the other ingredients. So oil, salt and flour. And you want to add the flour slowly, so stir it each time you add a new cup. Great! So once you have kind of a shaggy, not mixing texture, you're going to dump it out onto your work surface. And it's okay if there's a lot of extra flour on there. That'll keep it from sticking to your hands. And then we're going to knead the dough for 5 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer and get kneading. If the dough starts to get too sticky while you're kneading, you can always add a little bit more flour. But start with just a tiny bit at first so you don't add too much. Wow, 5 minutes of kneading is a long time. My hands are tired. So after you've finished that, and your dough is doughy, you're gonna put a little bit of oil in your second mixing bowl, just a tiny splash. And you're going to just smear it all over the inside there. You could also use a cooking spray if you have one. This is just so the dough doesn't stick to the inside of the bowl while it rises. So when you're ready to use it, it'll just come out easy. So there's my oiled bowl, and I'm just gonna take my dough, set it in there, cover it with a cloth. You can use a damp cloth if you like, but a clean one. And then we're gonna leave that for 45 minutes to an hour. So leave it sit in a nice warm place where it's not gonna get disturbed. Okie doke, so it's been an hour. Our dough has risen quite a bit. Look at that, it fills the bowl now. So we're gonna flour our work surface and take the dough out onto that work surface. I'm gonna split my dough into 2 pieces. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can make 1 big loaf of bread, but I'm gonna make 2. And you're just gonna roll these out or stretch them out flat so they're about an inch thick. They will rise a lot again. Make sure you've got lots of flour underneath. There's one. I'm gonna set that aside and do the second one the same. If you want to use a rolling pin, you can. So yeah, just under an inch thick, 2 rounds of bread, focaccia bread. And then we're going to take our damp cloth. If your cloth wasn't damp before, you do want to make it damp this time. And you're going to place that over your bread, and you're gonna wait again another 20 minutes, let that rise. Great, so now that it's been 20 minutes and our dough is risen again, we're gonna turn the oven on to preheat and transfer each of these or your single piece to a baking tray with parchment paper. Okay, now that they're on the baking tray, you're gonna poke them. So remember to wash your hands, and you're gonna poke holes all the way down to the bottom of the dough. You wanna see the parchment paper. You can do as little or as many holes as you like. Then we're going to drizzle some oil on top of the dough. I like to kind of smooth over the top so that there's a nice thin layer of oil covering the whole thing. So just sprinkle a little bit of rosemary on them, and then I've decided to make one of mine extra fancy. This round one, I'm gonna put some very thinly sliced cherry tomato pieces. And this is where you can get creative. You could use bell peppers. I'm gonna also do some thinly sliced red onion. You could do some garlic slices or whatever you really like. If you're using something like tomatoes though, don't do too many because it is quite wet and it will keep the dough from rising as nicely. There you go. And so that's gonna go in the oven for about 20 minutes at 400 degrees. So after about 20 minutes, or when the tops are golden brown, take your bread out of the oven and let it cool. Then you can enjoy it however you like, with some butter or some soup, or you could even use it to make a sandwich.